Usually, budget goes through a lot of stages before you see the figures put together. There is one they call the planning and fiscal strategy development. So before they put the figures together that are brought to Parliament for review and then necessary action, there's what they call the macro-fiscal planning and strategy development. This is where they sit down, they look at the business environment of the state, they look at the economic indicators relating to inflation, GDP, interest rate, import and export related, how much business per capita income, etc. And then they do a forecast as to how much they think this economy, what should be the projection of the economy for the following year. It is at that stage that they determine the national ceiling. As a country, for example, this year we are currently running, last year our national ceiling was 14 trillion, old leaf, 2022. This 2023, that figure was reduced to 10.6 trillion. I'm not quite sure, but it should be around that, 10.6 trillion as our national ceiling to say this is a budget within which we can operate as a country. For them to be able to ascertain that level, that figure, it's based on this planning and fiscal strategy development. So after ascertaining that budget ceiling, if they say it is going to be 10 trillion, then they begin to disintegrate to ministries, agencies, and departments now, based on the amount available, and taking into consideration the relevance of those MDAs to the national development agenda. That should be the ideal. So after the planning of fiscal strategy stage, the next stage is the budget preparation and forecasting. So now they have planned. They look at the macroeconomic variables, and now they've got all the indicators. They've agreed on the ceilings. They have developed a document they call the fiscal strategy statement that informs the budget. Now the next stage is to put the budget together, which is called the budget preparation and forecasting. It is at that stage you would see they do bilateral discussions. Even at district level, they have the budget oversight committees. Ministry of Finance will call MDAs. You go, you explain what you want to do for the following year, how much money you need. They listen to you, they take your information, and then but before you do that, they're going to send you a document that guides you in the process to say, for Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have allocated 10 billion. Do a budget explaining to us how we intend to use the 10 billion for 2024. And then come and refer it to the public. So it's a public hearing. After that session, they go on a retreat, they put the document together, and then they bring it to Parliament for parliamentary review and required action. So all of that happens until the budget is passed into law. We call it the budget preparation and forecasting stage. And then after that, you have the budget execution, cash management, and internal controls. So now, when the budget is passed into law, what you now do is to execute. On the 1st of January, our financial year runs, our fiscal year runs from January to December. So by 1st of January, the Ministry of Finance now has the authority to begin the disbursement or execution of the budget. There they will begin to do allocation to ministries, agencies, and departments based on the recommended figures from Parliament. So when ministries receive those monies, they have the responsibility to make sure they implement or they execute government programs. Monies are not just given to them as a pool basket. They tell you, we are giving you 10 billion, but these are the deliverables. So for all ministries, when they come for appropriation, this is one thing you, the honorable members, need to pay attention to. They do have what they call deliverables. You would have defended to the Ministry of Finance to say, these are the programs we want to do for next year, and this is the money relating to those programs. This is the budget for this, and this is the budget, and so on and so forth. So when they approve, you come, we expect that the monies, when they are sent to you, they should be used in line with those deliverables that were approved by Parliament. So all of that happens, cash management at MDA level, internal controls, compliance, so that they make sure that you work in line with provisions. All of that is another stage. And then after that, you have the accounting and financial reporting. So each ministry, agency, or department of government, you are expected to do your financial statement at the end of the year. And that financial statement, you are compared by provisions of the Public Financial Management Act to submit to Audit Service Sierra Leone for audit purpose. Okay, when you do your financial reporting, accounting and financial reporting, you send to audits, external auditors, which is Audit Service Sierra Leone, and then they do the audit, they submit the audit report for Parliament. So these are the 5 stages in the circle. In other words, you can actually have this like a ring. You have the fiscal planning, the budget preparation, budget execution, accounting and financial reporting, external audit, then that budget year ends. But by the time you are doing external audits, the other budget, you would have started implementation. Because I did say yesterday that we do have a 3-year rolling budget system. That is what we do. There's what we call the NTEC. Okay, let me leave that. Sorry. So that is the budget cycle. But then let us quickly look at the reforms in our budget appropriation process in the last few years. Firstly, the legal authority. Yesterday we talked about, for BFM management, the legal authority for public financial management in the context of Sierra Leone. We did talk about the Constitution, we talked about the PFM regulations, the Act, Procurement Act, we talked about Speaker's Order, etc. But specifically now for the role of Parliament in the budget process, we want to look at the laws, the legal authority that Parliament has. One is the 1991 Constitution that I have repeatedly explained, and then the second one is the Parliamentary Standing Orders. So if you look at 63 to 69 of the Parliamentary Standing Orders, it explains everything that is required of Parliament in the budget-making process. After that, you have the Public Financial Management Act of 2016 and the PFM Regulation of 2017. Honorable members, please don't worry. I've got your emails. Just after this presentation, the slides of yesterday and today will be sent to your emails. Most of you went to PBO when you are doing the round from department. So we received your emails. There was an attendance. And that was where I sent my departmental presentation to you. But I'm also going to forward this. If yours was not among, you can submit to Mr. Boring. Then I would share his slides with you after the presentation. So these are the legal environments specifically for the role of Parliament. So if you want to just know what the role of Parliament is in PFM governance, just look at these 3 documents. And then the role of Parliament, the 1991 Constitution, if you want to know, that says section 73.3 that says Parliament makes laws. That is a very broad one. But then if you want to come down further, you look at the Parliamentary Standing Orders, section orders 63 to 69. All talks about the budgetary process, what the role of Parliament is expected to be. That is where you see the appropriation committees, the mandate of the committees, etc. So you look at 63 to 69. And the Public Financial Management Act and the regulation, which I explained to you, that says we have approving authority. So you can also look at it. These are the 3 laws. So we all know principally that Parliament has responsibility to make laws, to represent people, and then to do oversight. So because we make laws, we represent people, and then we do oversight. That makes it extremely important for you to understand that at every stage of the budget cycle I've explained to you, Parliament has a role to play. Because you are doing oversight, you are also representing you. Which means at every stage you need to know the views of the people. Remember yesterday I did say to you that for quality budgets, the citizenry's democratic consent, you remember when I was talking about the forms of, forms of the state budgets, the classifications of the state budget characteristic, the democratic consent, that it must follow the citizenry's views. So, because of that, let me just go back to this slide for quickly, where we came from. You'll see that at planning stage, when they do the fiscal strategy statement, that statement as per law is supposed to be brought to Parliament for parliamentary approval, because that is what informs the budget. As budget preparation and the forecasting, of course, we all know that the draft being comes to Parliament for review and required action. And then budget execution, we do oversight. So you do oversight for all NDs. That means when they implement in the budget, you have a role as well. Accounting and financial reporting. The same way you do oversight on budget execution, you can do oversight on accounting and financial reporting. And of course, the external audit. The report of the financial year comes back to Parliament, and that is why I said yesterday, technically, the Auditor General is a staff of Parliament. Administratively not, because they are expected to be autonomous. Because if I report to you, it means you are my boss. So I'm actually working for you, and that is what the law says. So at every stage here, you see, all of these 5 stages, Parliament has a role to play. So we go back to slide 5, Victory. And then these are the stages now. When the budget is usually brought to Parliament, maybe after your vacation, by that time the budget, immediately you come, they will bring it. If go in, I'm going to explain why I've actually decided to disintegrate it to 4. The stage 1, we call it the first reading of the budget. So when a bill comes, they call it the appropriation bill of Sierra Leone. You will see all the government ministries, agencies, and departments, their names, and the amount that has been allocated to them. So they will do the first reading, and that first reading provision is actually informed by Section 41 of the PFM Act of 2016, and it is usually done by the Minister of Finance. So when they do the first reading, it goes to stage 2. They would lay the budget for that day, and then they leave it. Stage 2, which is the second reading, they do budget debates, and that debate usually takes up to 5 days or less. It can be less than 5 days. So if you look at that standing order provisions I gave to you, 63 to 69, you see all of these provisions there, that for second reading of the budget, it shouldn't take more than 5 days, but it can take less than 5. And then after the second stage, usually it is in that second stage, most people think the committee work, the appropriation committee work is all embedded in the stage 2. But I decided to break it so that, because that is the most critical stage. After the second reading, the budget is sent to the committee stage. So they call it the Committee of Supplies, or you call it appropriation committees, for review. So now at that point, members of Parliament are going to look at what the Ministry of Finance has submitted for each and every ministry, agency, or department as a kind of a proposed figure, and what the reasons are, what programs they say they're going to implement with that money. But then also, during the course of the appropriation, we would ask ministries, agencies, and departments to complete a document we usually send to them. It's a questionnaire explaining how they use the previous year's monies. And then, so you look at what was given to them last year, how they use it up to this point, and now why they are asking for what they are asking for and what they want to use it for. So during the appropriation, it is that document we look at, we scrutinize, and then we make a decision, we produce a report as to whether what they are asking for, they should be given, or it should be reduced, or it should be adjusted otherwise. So that is the stage, the committee stage. We are going to talk about it a little bit extensive. And then thereafter, they have the third reading, which is the budget enactment or approval. So they enact the budgets now. After the third reading, with all the amendments, we pass the budget into law. PFM says we approve the budget, but I like using the word we pass it into law. So these are the stages. Now, for these 4 stages I've just explained to you, the most important is the committee stage, which is the Committee of Supplies Appropriation Subcommittees. Because the decision we take at that point is what is going to inform the financial management of the state for the next 12 years. If you're going to approve a budget for a ministry, which function is not quite important to the national development agenda, you allocate a certain amount that is quite exorbitant, then it means we're actually not using state resources prudently. So it's very important that we pay attention to that committee stage, appropriation stage. Now, I was going to play these videos to see the way appropriation happens in other jurisdictions, but we do not have time. I will make it available to you later. These are actually short videos, but I'll leave them. This is in my...
Let's see. Let's see what...
Yes, I'm actually...
Let's see, man. There's some expectation is of shares.
Okay.
Over the years, it's difficult for members of Parliament to telling me twice. How can the second company the budget is submitted to the Committee of Supply? It means that it is Parliament that is going to supply money to that when we see the brackets and agencies. So the Parliament is going to supply money to the government, every committee or supplier.
Thank you so much, the legislative guru. Don't worry, I am going to send it. You will see all the videos. Let me just quickly run. I think time is almost against. So much. The most important thing we need to know here is at that appropriation stage, the committee stage now, we want to zoom in the way it happens. It is a key instrument. So we use an appropriation questionnaire. It's a document. We call it appropriation questionnaire, which I've explained. And that document is a key instrument used to carry out the appropriation process. The budget appropriation is carried out by Parliament in line with provisions of the 1991 Constitution and PFM. I've just explained those ones. And then, why do we do appropriation, really? Why do we do money supplies, like Mr. King said? Why do we appropriate the budget to ministries? Firstly, is to meet the constitutional and other legal requirements. Because the law says for the Ministry of Finance to spend a loan from the consolidated account, it must be endorsed by Parliament. So it means if we have not approved the budget before the end of the year, by 1st of January, the government is supposed to be on its knees. There will be no resources to spend. Though there are provisions we can actually use to do some extraordinary approvals, but the normal circumstances in Parliament has not approved the budget by 1st of January, no ministry is supposed to run. So that is just to meet that constitution, and then to also enhance budget credibility. If your budget is not approved or it's not endorsed by Parliament, you want to use it. In the eyes of the international community, nobody is going to treat it with any seriousness. And then thirdly, for budget efficiency, what I just explained to you. Now, the figures are tagged to ministries, agencies, and departments. So, and the decision to determine which amount goes for which ministry actually is a symbolic or is an indication of being efficient and prudent in expenditure by the state. And then we have to also enhance budget effectiveness. So if I now know that the budget they have assigned for Ministry of Social Welfare, for example, is 10 billion of 5 key deliverables. So those 5 key deliverables, our target is going to be to make sure that we achieve those 5 programs. Over the years, the problem we had, I was the budget and finance manager at Social Welfare 5K. The problem we usually have, that is a governance challenge, is the political heads and the administrative heads are always in conflict when it comes to budget implementation. The permanent secretary will say, I have the deliverables for which the money is given to us. We have to spend in line in those deliverables. The minister will say, I have my political agenda and I must achieve it. Don't tell me what to do, I am the boss here. So there is always that conflict. And because the PS are technical people, they always follow the process. Ministers, they are always very busy, the political heads. For most of the time, they will not even know for which purpose the money is approved. All they know is they have allocated 10 billion to our ministry. So what we did as part of the reforms in the last few years is to be inviting all of them, the permanent secretaries, and then the ministers, they all come to Parliament, so that when Parliament makes decision on what budget to approve, they know the purpose for which the budget is approved together. So when the PS says, but you know, why don't I give you this money, the minister is expected to understand. So these are the reasons why we usually use that budget questionnaire. Now, the reforms I mentioned to you, for 2020, in 2020, we had 7 appropriation committees. So the committees of supplies I just mentioned to you, when the times come for the budget appropriation, they divide all members of Parliament into 7 groups. That was the group we had in 2020. And before that time, we had different committees, number of committees. So, which means for 148 ministries, agencies, and departments, they will be divided into 7 groups. One group of these 7 committees will look at, say, roughly around 20 ministries, agencies, and departments within a week. You only have 1 week, 5 days, or 6 days maximum to do that work. It's a very daunting task. So that was what we were doing before. And then, before 2020, like I explained to you, the request we used to send to ministries was only requiring vote controllers to come by law to listen to why to come and explain and defend their budget. That was 2020. But, so after 20, okay. So ministers were not compared. If they wanted to come, they would come. If they don't come, it was not compulsory on them to come. But what was the key requirement was both controllers, because we looked at them to say, you are the ones holding the budget. You bear the greatest responsibility in the event of any challenge. So also, before that time, in 2020 and before, it used to be public hearing. That has not changed, but I've just explained in the process flow. So when they come, we don't just invite them to committee rooms and then have the session with them. We make sure it happens in the presence of civil society, the media, etc. So all appropriation committees. So the 7 committees will be seated in 7 different locations on the same date sometimes. This will be dealing with energy, Ministry of Energy, and other committees dealing with Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and other committees dealing with the Ministry of Mines, and so on and so forth. Same day. And then so what we do, at the end of the day, the report for each and every committee after the end of the 5th or the week session. The reports are consolidated. But before 2020, we were doing the report independently. So 7 committees will produce 7 different reports. And those 7 different reports will be presented to the Chairman Finance Committee, and he would move the motion for adoption of the appropriation bill by integrating the committee report. What this means is, at that time, the 7 committees would produce 7 reports. For each committee report on your own committee work, your MDAs. And then the Finance Committee chairman will take the 7 report. When it comes back to Parliament, he will say, I am raising this motion for this budget to be adopted after taking into consideration provisions or adjustments made in this committee report. So what is important here to know is, when the budget is passed into law, it is not a draft that is brought from the Ministry of Finance that is approved or passed into law. It is the amendment version of that report or that bill that is actually the law. Because those amendments will not reflect in the appropriation bill, but the provisions of the amendment will be in that report. So if you actually want to look at 2023 budget, for example, if you want to do a very thorough job, you have to look at it in tandem with the report, the appropriation report. Because, for example, ministry may have suggested 10 billion for a ministry, and the appropriation report says, no, I think in our own best estimation, they should be given 11 billion. So if you don't look at the appropriation report, that's 11, the extra 1 billion is not reflected. Other countries, what they do is, Nigeria, for example, I monitored their budget process. When they brought the appropriation report, they also bring a soft copy. So when the Parliament looks through the budgets, they do their adjustments, because our own law here says we should adjust the budget by plus or minus 5%. We can actually less it by 5, or we increase by 5, but we shouldn't do significant change. That is what the law says for Parliament. So when they do their adjustments in-house, they correct the appropriation bill based on the adjustment Parliament has agreed on, and then print out that adjusted version. It is that adjusted version that the clerk signs off on at the Finance Committee chair, and then they send to the Minister of Finance to say, this is the budget, and this is what we want you guys to implement. So, but it doesn't happen this way in our own case. So, 2021, we reviewed the process. So 2021, instead of 7 committees, we reviewed it to 31 sectorial committees. So for each sector, we had 1 committee, and the reason was we are 31 appropriation budget oversight committees. We said to ourselves, if you do oversight on Ministry of Energy, you are better placed to understand the operations of Ministry of Energy. So do appropriation on their budgets. So we had 31 committees, and then we had the vote controllers, and then the ministers, deputy ministers, and the technical heads of MDAs were now all required by law in the letters we sent to them to all come to Parliament so that we agree on the same budget. And then it was also a public hearing. Now, the budgets, the reports this time were consolidated into one instead of having 7 different budgets or 31 budgets. 31 report, because there were 31 committees. What we are now doing is to consolidate the 31 report into one, but they are divided into volumes. And then it is that one report now that the Finance Committee chair will read, and then they make decision in passing the budget. So this was for 2021. But then we came back to 2022, we realized there was need to do an amendment. So the 31 committees, the place was quite chaotic. Imagine having 31 ministries coming the same day in Parliament, sitting accommodation was challenging, and so on and so forth. So we had to review again, based on the advice of the MPs, we now add 11 sectorial committees. So last year, the 2022 appropriation, there were 11 committees, and then the vote controllers, all other people came, just as we used to do. It was again public hearing, and then the reports again were consolidated into one report and then presented. Yes, so what's changed for 2022 was the number of committees we actually amended from 31 to 11. And before that time, I just said to you it was 7. So we moved from 7 committees to 31 committees and now 11 committees.